because sometimes we'll have patients that say, my hair is all over the place. It's shedding, and what we want to make them understand is we believe them. Mm-hmm. We believe them. And I will say, I believe you, even if I am not getting a ton of hairs out, because oftentimes they've shampooed that morning before they've seen us.
Hi, skin friend. Thanks so much for joining me on this week's episode of The Skin Reel. This week, I've got a first in my year and a half of podcasting. I actually have two guests on with me today. I've got Dr. Diane Orlinsky and Dr. Eva Simmons-O'Brien, and they are a dynamic duo. They have been friends for decades and now business partners also for decades. And I'm so excited to have them share with us their knowledge of hair loss, because this is something that affects everyone, men, women. If you live long enough, you're going to have hair loss. So I love how they break it down for us today. So both Dr. Orlinsky and Dr. Simmons-O'Brien are not only dermatologists, but they also have extensive training in internal medicine. They received their residency training at Johns Hopkins Hospital, where they also are still on faculty there, helping to teach young doctors. And they practice in Towson, Maryland, where they have been practicing together for, like I said, over several decades. And they are still fast friends and share common values and how they want to take care of their patients. And while they see bread and butter dermatology, their real passion is hair loss. And you can tell. And not only do they practice what they preach, they've got amazing, gorgeous hair themselves. They're going to share all their insight and new treatments, things that I never even heard of for hair loss treatment. And we'll really take a deep dive with that in part 2. So ladies, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
I introduced you briefly before, but I would love to hear in your own words how you two became friends, decided to start a practice together, and have now had a practice that spans longer than a lot of marriages.
It is a marriage.
It is a marriage.
Yeah. So I'm going to start because I was a medical student at Hopkins and I rotated through dermatology and of course, felt like I died and went to heaven. And Eva was my resident when I was a medical student. And tell everyone why you liked me.
So this is 33 years ago that we became friends. And I remember seeing this young woman who was ready for her rotation and was in a royal blue miniskirt with white polka dots and red lipstick. And I said, wow, I said, that's my kind of medical student, because I could tell already she was confident that she was her own person and she was engaged. So that was someone who I knew that I was going to enjoy, being on the rotation with. And as it turns out, we became fast friends.
I love that. And when did you all decide to start working together and open up your own practice?
So over 20 years ago, we were working at another practice and then decided that we wanted to go out on our own. So I would, on my days off, look for office space, and we opened it September 2003.
I mean, to be able to work and practice with one of your best friends, how much fun is that?
It's
great. We fight like sisters too, though.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of it.
That's the beauty of it.
The fact that you can actually fight, like even with a spouse, is important, because if you keep everything in, then it just festers and explodes one day.
But on the essentials, like what's important and what keeps us together, we're very, very like-minded. Yeah. And I think too, we also, prior to working together, had our own work experiences. So we brought our own separate experiences. I was full-time faculty for about 6 or 7 years at Hopkins, and then went into a private practice and brought a lot of my patients. And Diane, was in a private practice prior to the practice that she and I were together and worked for someone else before we opened our own practice. And I think the practice that we left was invaluable because it taught us how not to run a practice. And sometimes that's better than being put in the most fabulous practice from the get-go, is to be in a practice where there are lots of challenges, and then you learn from that.
Correct.
Well, tell us a little bit about the practice that you have now. Are you all sort of general bread and butter dermatology, or is there certain areas that you all are specialized in?
So our practice now is probably about 55% cosmetic, 50 to 55% cosmetic, and the rest is general dermatology. We have cut out things that we no longer want to do because we're old. We're like, I don't want to do this, that, and the other thing. But we do love doing non-invasive, cosmetic procedures, but we love hair loss. And we do a lot with vulvar diseases too. I guess being two women, multicultural, we do attract a certain population of patients that want to talk to people who are actually going to listen. So more than what percentage is our cosmetic and 1% is our medical, I consider ourselves like holistic dermatologists because we trained in internal medicine first. And so that gives us a background on how to look at the person as a whole person, not just, okay, this person has this one problem, let's just focus on the problem. We really focus on the entire person.
Yeah, we both did 2 years of medicine residency at Hopkins, and that was purposeful because I was given great advice years ago when I was a medical student at Yale by a dermatologist at Harvard who said, in his opinion, the best dermatologists are those that have the strongest training in internal medicine. So that has stayed with us, and that's the core. We actually train medicine residents now, and we're assistant professors in the Department of Internal Medicine. And that is really the core of our practice. We want to know the total patient, just not what their skin issue is, because we know all too well that the skin can manifest or be a part of anything else that's going on in that individual.
That's so important. I think so often we think of, or people think of their skin as just this superficial covering and really your face, right? And that really what's going on internally is reflected in your skin. So that's super important. Let's just talk about hair loss, right? Because you guys both have amazing hair. So I want to know all your secrets.
We work at it. It's a full-time job and very, very expensive. But when everybody that I've told who, we're going to be on this podcast about hair loss, and literally everybody said it's everywhere. I mean, it is an epidemic now.
I used to think it was just something men worried about. And then now I hit my 40s. I'm like, wait, no, women are worried about. I'm worried about my eyebrows, right? So it's not just a condition men worry about. Women, so many women are worried about it too. I feel like hair loss, it walks that line between, well, is it cosmetic? Is it medical? Because insurance doesn't want to pay for a lot of the treatments, but a lot of the causes are medical, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in no way, shape, or form do I consider hair loss cosmetic.
Yeah.
And not at all. It is a natural part of aging. Androgenetic alopecia, I always tell my patients if that patient dies at 100 with a head full of hair, that patient had more hair when he or she or they were 20. So androgenetic alopecia is going to affect all of us if we live long enough. But I think it's funny because Diane and I had tons of hair when we were young. I mean, I had hair for 8 people. She had hair for 12 people. Yeah, and we complained about it. So now, I chuckled to myself saying, thank God we started out with hair like that, because I'm sure we'll talk about it during this podcast, but I'm a big telogen effluvium sufferer, and from having children, pregnancies, just the shedding was tremendous with each child. And that's something that I don't think you ever truly recover from, depending on the age when that sets in. And for me, it was in my 30s because that's when I had my kids. And I believe perimenopause is probably 20 years before the cessation of menses. So I think that factors into quite a bit.
I don't think it's cosmetic either, because I can tell you, I can't even count the number of patients who I found out that they had thyroid disease or they had, some other autoimmune disease based on their hair loss.
I actually just saw a lady on Friday who, this goes back to internal diseases present sometimes with skin and hair changes, right? She was coming to see me for hair loss, but back in 2017, she saw another dermatologist for hair loss, and that dermatologist astutely picked up that this is not just female pattern or androgenetic hair loss. This is something more, and did blood work and found out she had Graves' disease. So that was the presenting symptom of her Graves' disease, and the dermatologist was able to pick that up because of the hair loss. Walk us through, someone comes into your clinic for hair loss, right? What does that appointment look like with you all?
We actually block allotted time for hair loss.
We block a double appointment.
Yeah. So it's a half an hour appointment for new patients with hair loss. And sometimes, depending on how complicated they are, I might keep them at that 30 minutes until we're at a good stage. I could spend an hour, but at least 30 minutes with the expectation that they haven't lost their hair overnight, usually. So I don't feel pressed to, and we'll talk about it, to try and do a biopsy on the same day, because I'm trying to gather information. I'm trying to collect information, and I'm trying to educate the patient.
It's an interrogation process.
Because oftentimes the patient has already seen several people.
It's fraught with so much emotional baggage too, right? I mean, this is very distressing for men, but women as well, maybe even more so, right? Because it's not really expected. We think of men, oh, they just bald, right? But for women to lose their hair can be really emotionally distressing. So yeah, Dr. Orlinsky, are there any particular questions that you ask someone at that appointment? Like, what are some of the things you like to interrogate?
So, I mean, of course, I'll ask duration. Have they seen anybody else? Has a biopsy been done? When is the last time they had their labs checked by any doctor? And unfortunately, a lot of times when people say, I don't have an internist. So, then we go down that rabbit hole. Then we'll ask about the cleansing habits that people do for their hair. Are they doing any straighteners, chemicals? I'll ask, what are they using now to help with the hair loss? And, that's usually like a litany of things that people are using. What medications are they on? Have they stopped or started any medications? Have they had any recent surgeries? Any recent life trauma events?
We do ask about, their labs and if they've had any and what their supplements are. We often find that a lot of people are very deficient in vitamin D, or know that they've been anemic their entire life. And no one has really told them what the source of their anemia is. So their anemia has never been worked up. We work with a wonderful hematologist in town who is probably, yes, he's brilliant. And he's probably one of the foremost leading experts in iron infusion. He's written all the papers. He's a full professor at Georgetown, but he practices here in Baltimore. And so many of our patients get iron infusions, which almost seems like a lost art, but can make a huge, huge difference. So we really, as Diane stated, we really try to get that internal, aspect going. But I always ask them, when did you start noticing the hair loss, or who noticed the hair loss? Because sometimes people will come in because they're hairstylists, and I think this is terrific, because I loved it for the stylist to be proactive, not just for melanoma and lesions in the scalp, but hair loss and everything like that, because they're seeing these individuals often far more frequently than we would ever. And sometimes it's their stylist that has encouraged them to seek an appointment, because they don't necessarily perceive that they have an issue.
Also ask about family history. Like, what are the other women in the, if it's one, what's your sister's hair like? What's your mom's hair like? Or as of late, over the last 4 years, I'll ask, have you had a COVID vaccine recently? Have you had COVID? Because I know after my second COVID vaccine, I shed like I thought I was going to go bald.
Yeah.
It was terrifying.
My sister did too, right? That ophiasis pattern she had, and it was really striking and very distressing for someone in their 30s to experience all this hair loss. Now, what about, do you make a distinction between hair loss and hair shedding?
Well, we do a thorough physical exam. Shedding is, you ask the person, okay, do you see hair on your sweaters? Do you see more on the floor? Is someone commenting there's more hair on the floor or in the shower? Hair loss is kind of like, it's very subjective, though. Like Eva said, the hairdresser will say, oh, I see some hair loss. So it's kind of like the end result of the shedding. But most people don't see that hair loss until they've lost over 50% of their hair.
Yeah. So they might see the stylist, because they're looking over top down on a person, that they might see a thinning area that the patient, unless they're looking through a mirror, is not really appreciating. They might, say that their temporal areas are getting thinner, or maybe their anterior hairline, especially if it's a guy. But sometimes they're not even aware of the thinning that could be in the crown. So that's also very interesting. But we do a thorough, we draw pictures. I mean, we get into what an anagen hair is, what a telogen hair is.
We use the dermoscope on the
catagen hairs. I mean, that's where we're educating the patient. We're talking about a follicular unit. We're talking about hairs within that unit and how these units are in different places within the scalp. So that education that I would say 99% of the patients have not had, no one has really sat down with them and talked to them about that, and then asked them their experiences. Have they experienced a shedding before? Because that's definitely going to factor in, on their hair loss that they might be coming, and to see you for.
And when you're looking at the scalp, are you looking for changes in the scalp skin or scarring, things like that? And does that sort of lead you down a different path?
We're looking for everything. We're looking at the health of the scalp. We're looking, is it red? Is there scaliness? Are there some things that do you have some scaliness or perifollicular scale around each hair follicle, which leads us down a certain path? Are there areas where there are no hair follicles whatsoever? And is it true scarring or not scarring? But I think when we first start, we think in our minds, is this scarring or non-scarring hair loss? That's kind of like the broad categories. And then depending on the health of their scalp, then we'll kind of, go down one avenue.
I'll explain to the patient, I'm trying to figure out whether it's an issue with your hair or is it with the skin of your scalp. So, the house that your hair is living in, because both can contribute to hair loss, or is it a combination of the two? And in individuals of color, you may not see red. Oftentimes you don't. So you need to ask them, do you have any sensations? Is any area sore
or itchy
or burny or tingling? Or do you get kind of a shimmery timbers type of feeling, that goes on? Any sensations whatsoever, because they may tell you that. I also look for the perifollicular scale. We also look for patulous follicles, pigmentation, crusting. We have quite a bit of lupus patients for a private practice. That was part of my research years ago. And sarcoid. So you have to think of all of those. And alopecia areatas that are not areatas, they're diffuse. They do exist. They're not always going to be your perfect round patches or your ophiasis or what have you. It can be diffuse. So that, and telling the patient that as we're examining them, and also doing a hair pull just to see how easily the hairs are not coming out, because sometimes we'll have patients that say, my hair is all over the place, it's shedding, and what we want to make them understand is we believe them. Mm-hmm. We believe them. And I will say, I believe you, even if I am not getting a ton of hairs out, because oftentimes they've shampooed that morning before they've seen us or what have you. And
often it ends in a tear. There are a lot of patients when they say, we say, I believe you, they'll start crying. It's very, very emotional.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't believe them and they'll say, oh, you're just a hysterical woman.
Right. Especially if they appear to have thick hair, right? But it's less than what they had. So they'll say, I hear my ponytail's not as thick as it used to be. Looking at them, they may look like they have a full head of hair that a lot of people would envy, but they know there's been a difference. So yeah, just believing in them and realizing that, yes, this bothers them. This isn't their baseline. This isn't what they're used to. So I love that.
They're losing eyebrows or eyelashes, or are they losing body hair in other areas? That's where you have to ask all of those, do they have allergies? Right now it's pollen in Maryland, and the pollen's been out for probably about 3 weeks or so. So this is usually when I start seeing my alopecia areata folks who have now ventured off into the golf course or they're riding bikes, and they have such a very strong association with uncontrolled pollen issues and their hair loss. So, all of those things are important.
At that first visit, are you going to go order blood work, or you said you don't typically do a biopsy? What is sort of the culmination of that first visit?
Well, I like to tell patients I would say 90% of the time I'm going to do a biopsy. And I think it's only fair to prepare someone for that. Because
full traumatic.
Yeah, many times people have never had a biopsy before. So they're
stitches.
Yeah, it's stitches. So they're envisioning pain, this whole bloodbath type of thing. They say, is it here in the office? So you really kind of, to be able to explain what the biopsy procedure is, that it's very simple, very safe, very easy to do, and really gives us great information in terms, I said, it gives us the lay of the land. It helps us with what is and what isn't. As I said, oftentimes hair loss diagnoses are process of elimination for what you have not seen. We do direct immunofluorescence if necessary, but we tell them about what the biopsy procedure will entail. So they'll already be prepared for it as best that they can. When we get them scheduled right away or as soon as we can for that, there's not a big lag time between seeing us, and there is quite a wait for seeing us. But once they see us, then we get them in for that biopsy so that we can really get the show on the road. And I haven't ever, well, maybe I have, but I don't recall recently or recent years anyone saying that that's something that they do not want to do.
I have.
Yes, you did. You did. She did. That was her first too. That was her first.
And I said, but you need that. Like, I can't help you otherwise. But maybe that's just not the right person, right match for us. I don't have anyone leaving the first visit without discussion of labs, and either I write a prescription for the labs or I say, let's have your most recent lab sent here. And if there's anything missing, which there usually is because they're not checking everything that we're checking, I said, we can always add to that. And that makes people feel like we're actually actively doing something.
Yeah.
I also have discussions about, what supplements they're taking, because I do want to give them something that they could do besides just getting their labs. And so maybe discuss a hair vitamin.
And sometimes we haven't been able to properly examine the scalp the way we'd like to, because the person is coming in with braids or weaves or extensions, and we'll see what we can see, but we'll ask, and I will say, when are you planning to have these removed? And I think that's important. You have to be respectful of people's plans. You can't just say, well, I can't see anything. You need to take these out and come, they might be going on a trip, or they might be giving a presentation. They might have this style for a particular reason. So I will say, when are you planning to have the braids removed or the weaves removed? Because we would really love for you to be able to come back in so I can really take a good look at your scalp and your hair and you see what's going on. And at that time, I would try to also accommodate them and do the biopsy, because we've already talked about it. But, I've already told them that my view is limited based on what style they might be coming in with.
I would love to know, what labs do you all typically order? Do you kind of throw the kitchen sink at it, or are you a little more selective in the beginning?
We're selective because of costs for patients. We actually have found many diagnostic codes that get almost all the labs covered. So we've been very clever about that, because you have to kind of, I'm not going to say fool, but go around the insurance companies to get certain things drawn. So I'll tell you what I draw, and then you can say, I think they're similar. I will do a CBC with diff, so a blood count and CMP, complete medical profile. I will do ferritin and iron profile, TSH, antithyroid antibodies, maybe a T3. Sometimes I just kind of do the screening there depending on their insurance, but vitamin D level, plasma zinc, B12, folate, some acetate. Sometimes to distinguish between if that ferritin is falsely reactive.
Do you typically order like DHEAS?
Like, say if it's someone in their 20s, 30s who also has acne and has been missing their period, I will order the hormonal profile. But if it's, someone who's just coming in for your garden variety hair loss, I may not start with that. I may just start with labs.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot about what we order.
The hormonal profile that we would add when we've taken that history, if it's a younger person and we're thinking this might be PCOS or a polycystic ovarian syndrome or syndromic like that. I mean, that's where it may be the first time they're ever hearing about this, or it may be something that they're already aware of, and they've had that discussion and treatment with their gynecologist, because we all know that once they're on oral contraceptives, then those hormones are not going to be accurate. So that's a complete waste.
What about, you mentioned a new supplement, right? Is there a supplement that you think works for hair loss? I know back in the day, right, everyone did biotin, and now biotin's like thumbs down. Exactly.
I just wanted to add one more thing about the labs. Again, we're so familiar and comfortable with seeing patients with lupus. I think lupus is underdiagnosed, and I think it's missed. So when we see someone that we really believe has chronic cutaneous lupus and they're not even necessarily aware of that, and the ears are always a dead giveaway inside the ears, that we will get an ANA, an anti-nuclear antibody. So we'll do that. And oftentimes these individuals, usually ladies, will say that they have family histories where a mom or a sister or someone has connective tissue disease, and they'll say those words, or lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or things like that. So we'll also, in addition to the thyroid antibodies, we'll get ANA.
Great. Love that. And good. I'm glad I'm like on par with you all. So I'm I'm making sure I'm ordering the right stuff too. But yeah, let's talk about nutritional supplements, because we have a lot out there, right? Like Viviscal, Nutrafol. I've had some people tell me just take vitamin D. What do you recommend as a good hair loss supplement?
So we differ in this a little bit. I personally like Nutrafol, although I am testing out Botest right now. I did Viviscal for a while and it helped, but not as much as the Nutrafol. In fact, my hairdresser noticed that, wow, Nutrafol really has made a huge difference for you. So I do the Nutrafol. But having said that, and especially with your comment about vitamin D, my vitamin D was checked with taking Nutrafol, and there's 2,500 units of D3 in there. My vitamin D, I had stopped taking my extra D and it plummeted. So I'm not sure that the D, and this may be like, I don't know, sacrilegious or something, but I don't think that the D that's in the Nutrafol is getting absorbed as much as like a different type that maybe has K2 in it or is a higher number. So I actually now have to take extra D.
What do you take? Because I know I broke a bone back in the fall and I need to get my vitamin D checked. I'm like your patients who I do not have an internist, but I now take 4,000 international units of vitamin D just every day.
And you want to take it with K2.
Right.
I mean, the studies are coming clearly not from the United States. They are coming from Europe and Asia, where I think supplements are taken far more seriously, and actually higher standards in those countries for supplements. But that has been shown to really help keep the calcium from leaching and, in either direction, because the minute you are 30 or below, if the range for D in your particular lab, and most labs is about 30 to 100, the minute you hit 30, you're precipitating calcium out of your bones. And as soon as you go over 100, there's a risk of precipitating the calcium out of your bones. But there is one lone study that I think looked at lifeguards who they allowed their Ds to get up to 120 and did not see any adverse effects. There's so many internists who are very accepting of D levels that are
26, 30
to 40, and in individuals of color. I consider myself a type 5 skin complected person, and I would say like 4.5-ish, 5. I might have a 2-week window in June where I might make some D in my skin, and then I'm not, because I'm outdoors, I'm playing tennis, I'm walking, I'm doing a lot of outdoor activity. So that sun is completely bypassing my epidermis to make D in my skin. So again, we educate patients about that.
And we want the level to be between 40 and 60 to grow hair.
I actually like it a little bit higher, but yeah. Oh, and we're getting back to the vitamins. I think Nutrafol is a great vitamin. It's just that for me personally, I think I did better on Viviscal, which is completely revamped their website and their vitamins. Actually, they don't have a professional strength anymore. They have one for hair growth in their tablets that they've added more things to. They've got 2 more vitamins. One is a collagen one that is their hair care vitamin. That's fish collagen with amino acids. And then there is a self-care vitamin that has biotin and hyaluronic acid in it, because most patients with hair loss will come into the office saying, well, I take biotin, because they believe that there's this belief that biotin grows hair. And we have to say, no, biotin is not going to grow your hair. Biotin, can help your hair become stronger and your nails become stronger so that they're less likely to split or break or what have you. But in terms of of stimulating growth, biotin's not going to do it. And oftentimes we have patients who are on crazy amounts of biotin.
And that can interfere with your labs,
yes.
biotins.
Yeah.
So we tell people if they are on biotin, they need to stop at about 5 days before getting any labs checked.
Yeah, we try to make sure people aren't double dipping. They'll want to be on Nutrafol, but they also love their multivitamin and this and that. And we'll get on our phones and we'll look at everything that's in there or have them send us and we'll say, you're double dipping because it's easy to find someone who's on 15,000 IUs a day. And I'm like, no, we don't want that either.
When you were asking about which D we take, I take now the Pure Encapsulations D/K2, and I think it's 5,000 of the D. Because I have osteoporosis, I also take a prescription D2. I think my doctor has me on it like once every other week. I take the 50,000. So, I'm on a lot. My level is still only like 50. So I need it. I need all that.
I take Micro Ingredients, the organic brand that's very reasonably priced. It's about 90 pills for $18. And it's, I take their D3 5,000 with K2, which is 100 micrograms. And I take it Monday through Friday, weekends off. My last level was 75.
I'm definitely getting my levels checked this spring. And I do think there are a lot of great supplements out there for vitamin D. We're learning so much about how it's so important for not just our skin and hair, right? But for all our whole body. And I think people think, I'm just going to go out in the sun and get some vitamin D. But to your point, especially if you have darker skin, you can be outside and you are not going to synthesize it. And some people, especially as you get older, have trouble synthesizing it. So there's safer ways to get it than from being outside without some protection.
Well, it oversees 5,000 genomes. And there was a paper that came out in 20 that talked about the importance of a healthy gut microbiome, that you have to have good flora in your gut in order to even absorb the D. And I know this is true because before I understood or knew that, we would have patients on prescription strength of 50,000 IUs with the protocol we followed from Dr. Susan Jandeber, who was at Hopkins for years and is one of the foremost researchers in calcium and D metabolism. We follow her protocol and we believed that our patients were taking it. They said they did. And maybe the tiniest bip, and they may have gone from 19 to 23, and it's 8 weeks later.
Right, like how is it?
And you know what? These are people who had never been on vitamin D. Many of them have, this low-grade IBS or irritable bowel thing going on. So it made complete sense. So we're also encourage our patients to get on a good multi-strained probiotic. So we have that discussion as well. The gut microbiome, I'm happy for the young GIs these days because they're really getting kind of the education and their fellowships that all of us should have had. And the rest of us have had to really learn on our own. I follow this amazing naturopath, Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, who's in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. She has a podcast, and I've learned a lot of great information from her and the guests that have been on her show talking about various supplements and the microbiome, the gut microbiome, and how they're finding out more and more every day that not only flora that we need probiotics, but sometimes antibacterial agent can be, when they start talking about Akkermansia and things along those lines, about how there are different critters that kind of live in our intestines and colon that can make a huge difference as to whether or not our brains become leaky or we have other physiologic happenings going on. So it really is up and coming. And I think it's really pretty exciting along with everything else that's happening in medicine, the immunologic, but to get more of a handle on the role that nutrition can play in our health is so important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And especially as we're living longer, we're also struggling with all these chronic conditions, diabetes, obesity, all these metabolic issues, figuring out the gut, skin, brain axis. This is really, I think, where medicine's heading. So totally agree. And I like to say skincare is whole body care. You could say hair care is whole body care, right? How we take care of our body on the inside. I would love to hear what some of your pearls are for treating hair loss. Are there medications? And of course it varies, right, on what exactly you're treating. But say like run-of-the-mill androgenetic alopecia, woman in her 50s, menopausal, postmenopausal? What are some treatment options for her?
I will definitely say people should be on some sort of hair vitamin, so that you can't grow hair without these extra nutrients. You just cannot. And then I'll, make sure that they're getting enough vitamin D. I will talk about also adding a topical. There are a lot of topicals out there these days. We have a compounding pharmacy that makes a concoction that has steroid and finasteride, minoxidil, sometimes latanoprost, caffeine, niacinamide, like a lot of different things you can put in there for hair growth. If someone doesn't want to deal with that, then we have Carifactor topically from Lutronic or /Carifactor. And I also there's Definage. They have a new hair growth product as well. So, depending on funds, like if it's unlimited funds, then I might have them use Carifactor and Definage and, alternate like during Monday through Friday, do the Carifactor or Definage on the weekend or one in the morning, one at night. But the topical does really help. It's like food for the hair. And then I will talk about oral minoxidil if that's right for the person. It also depends on if they're on any blood pressure medicine, what other medicines they're on. Do they want to take a pill that will grow hair that possibly could have other side effects? And then I'll talk about light treatments for their hair that they could do at home. And there are LED lights, and soon some other fun things are coming out that I don't know if we're at liberty to say about. So they can do that at home. And then we have in-office treatments such as PRP and Carifactor mesotherapy, which grow hair. So what are their funds? How much do they want to do? Do they want to start with one thing? We can throw the kitchen sink at them and give them everything that's available in 2024, but it's overwhelming.
Yeah. So PRP, we've been doing that for years, and some people are great candidates for that. I personally think if you're a very young person coming to me with hair loss specifically that looks to be androgenetic and confirmed through biopsy, then I'm not too sure that your platelets are going to, the stem cells and growth factors from your platelets are going to be that beneficial to you. So that's where we might, if they can do some of these treatments that Diane has talked about in terms of afford, we might go with the signaling proteins from Korea, which are in the Carifactor. We have seen, amazing growth with those, as well as people's PRP, if that's going to work for them. Getting back to the nutrition, I like collagen supplements because I think collagen can help not only hair, skin, and nails, but clearly muscles and bones and joints. And I like the wild fish collagen preparations. So I think that by VizCal's self-hair care pill for $18 is very, very reasonable and is great for people who don't want to put collagen powder into their smoothie or their coffee or their tea. So if someone's younger than 50, we might consider spironolactone in a female patient for hair loss, because we've used a lot of that in our career and still do for many of our acne patients. If someone's over 50, 55, then low-dose oral minoxidil works like a charm and is really, in our practice, very well tolerated at minuscule doses, like that a quarter of a tablet, so 0.625, milligrams can really grow significant amount of hair. Even the 1.25 can. So we're never going higher than 2.5, and rarely. You don't need to have at least a woman on 2.5. Most of them do beautifully maxed out at 1.25. I do agree with the infrared systems, but you have to use them like everything. If you're not going to use them, they're not going to work for you. The diode lasers are what's coming out in the future. The home use, I think that's going to be easier for people because it's less frequent in terms of having to use it. But so there are lots of exciting things. But getting back to just hygiene and care of the skin of the scalp and the hair. It's not about shampooing, right? It's about cleansing the scalp. And I think that makes an important differentiation to people, because there are many people who believe that they should not be cleansing their scalp as often, and that could harm it, or that could dry it out or make things worse. So we have to go through that educational process on how the overgrowth of yeast and bacteria are going to create inflammation on the skin of the scalp and create this unnecessary, fluid underneath the skin that's going to have the hair just snap and break off. So I love, love, love these pre-treatment products, pre-shampoo treatment products that loosen up that collaretive scale around the base of the hair follicle. I think everybody should be using those, whether you think you have a hair problem or not, because I have seen my patients come in freshly shampooed and still see that little chokehold of extra skin cells around their hair.
That's what Restoracy product.
So Restoracy makes a product that's wonderful for that. Nutrafol has one. Coco and Eve has one. Briogeo has one. Everybody is coming out with these pre-shampoo treatment products that usually contain charcoal, peppermint, rosemary, and some are in like a toothpaste-like material that has a little bit of a grit. So when you massage, it loosens up. And I tell people, just sleep in it, put it in your hair overnight, and then shampoo it out in the morning, or try to have it on at least an hour before you do, or put it on before you go to the hairdresser. So by the time you're there, it's been on your scalp for a half an hour or more. Restoracy is wonderful because it's a liquid, it's a solution. It's actually the enzyme from baby salmon saplings that is like enzymatically eating up the dead skin and debris around the hair follicle. But I think they've taken the place of Nizoral and Loprox shampoo for me. I have people, I hardly have anyone on those shampoos.
I have a lot of people on Loprox shampoo.
I don't, because I find that these pre-treatment scrubs and then getting them on a detoxifying shampoo similar, and you can find a lot of brands that are very reasonable, like Giovanna, Avalon, organic brands that are very reasonably priced, can be great first shampooings to deep cleanse the skin and the scalp. I just always remind my patients, if it is a brand like that, when it gets into the eyes, it can sting a little bit. So obviously they have to, be a little bit more careful, but they're color friendly because a lot of patients are concerned about that as well. And then I say follow with a shampoo of your choice, conditioner of your choice, something that is, depending on your hair type, you may not even need a conditioner, but most of my patients need a conditioner. I need a boatload of conditioner. So
I don't use Nizoral shampoo anymore. If I can avoid it, if the insurance companies don't dictate, I have to use it because of the red dye. I actually, when I use it, I feel like I taste it in my mouth. That just can't be good. But who needs red dye in their hair? It's not good.
Yeah. Well, maybe me.
Yeah, right.
Now, what about like coal tar or T-Sal, shampoos like that? Are they effective for that scale?
Yeah, I mean, any zinc shampoo, but tar is iffy. There are reports sometimes that it's dangerous or not so dangerous, and it smells awful. And people's compliance, it's just not good with tar. But if someone can't afford anything, I will give them lots of shampoo samples of the tar shampoos and of the zinc. Tar was good for psoriasis. I mean, we definitely used a lot of tar with psoriasis, but what Eva's talking about is really good for psoriasis too. So you don't need to have that nasty smell and the texture and the danger of maybe some carcinogenicity, depending on which article you read.
Yeah, and if you don't have eczema, if you don't have a psoriasiform scalp or psoriasis, I'm not including those patients in this, but say just Derm, you can do a lot of, do it yourself. You can apple cider vinegar, Himalayan sea salt, kosher salt, throw a little Manuka honey in, or anybody's honey, organic. And so I'll give my patients recipes how they can make their own. So you don't have to, always purchase something.
What about hairstyling practices? Do you tell someone who's struggling with hair loss, like tone it down with the heat or certain styling styling practices?
I have to say this because I'll forget it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have so many patients who have worn their hair apart down the middle their entire life, and they get traction alopecia. And this is usually I'm the first person who's ever said anything to them, and many often these are Caucasian women. And I said, look at how wide your part is. And I'll part their hair on the other side. And I said, see, so, how they can see the narrowing of the part. So I'm very proactive about encouraging my patients to change up their styles, change up their part. And they're like, well, my hair won't go that way. I'm like, wear a headband, a barrette to kind of hold it. I said, you can train your hair to do that, because just the weight of the hair on either side day in, day out for 60 years is going to create such a huge widening of the part. So we definitely talk about ways that you can be more hair friendly in terms of your grooming.
Turning down the heat of the curling iron, doing a deep conditioner, once every 1 or 2 weeks.
Not always
washing your hair every
not
day.
always having the blow dryer on the maximum.
Right.
So if you have coarse hair, oftentimes you're using the blow dryer to straighten the hair, and then you're going to back that with a flat iron. So we'll talk about try wet setting your hair and having more of a diffuse heat under the hair dryer with rollers if you can do it. If you can't, or with blow drying, try to turn the heat down on that, and try to turn the heat down on the flat iron so that you're never higher than 350. You're not in Chilan of 500, which is crazy. And have a heat protected agent that you like, that you can use on your hair prior to
and
help
don't
protect
use it every
that.
day.
And and definitely don't use it every day. And have your satin and silk pillowcases. Have your travel with them. Have your satin or silk caps that if you don't have the pillowcases, the caps that you can put on. Have your wool beanies or your wool winter hats lined with satin,
because wool breaks your hair off.
There's a great company now called, I believe, Parabella, which actually makes lined.
Yeah, you just got me.
Yeah, lined wool caps, and you can find them on Amazon. But that helps to keep the hair from breaking.
Yeah, I was going to say the silk, the theory behind the silk is that it helps protect the hair from breakage, right?
Also, frequent haircuts. Like some people will come in and their ends are destroyed. And I say, your hair's never going to grow. It's just going to keep breaking up the shaft. So haircuts really every 6 to 8 weeks. Just even if it's just a little trim, and their hair will grow so much faster. A lot of people haven't had their hair cut in a year and they're wondering why it's not growing. And then I look at the ends and every end is split. It's never going to grow. Unless it's cut.
That end is going to festoon. It's going to partition up, and then it's just going to
break off.
And then it's going to break. Yeah.
Probably people are so freaked out about their hair loss, right? The thought of intentionally cutting it, what they have, is really scary. But yeah, to that point, you got to get rid of the dead stuff so that the hair shaft can be healthy and grow. Absolutely.
It's nice to see there's so many silk and satin scrunchies out there, and not trying to pull the hair so super tight, just being aware of the products and the accessories, because the accessories can cause breakage.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she'll ask me to do her hair, and she'll bring me the hair elastic, and it's just full of hair. So we got to work on some gentle techniques there. This has been so much fun. I've learned so much. I love how you guys take a really holistic approach to this, right? It's not just like a cookie cutter recipe for hair loss. And it's exciting that we're at this day and age where we're learning so much. There are things coming out. I was just at a meeting where they were talking about doing a topical stem cell therapy for hair loss coming out in the next year or two. So really an exciting area. And I would just love it if they could figure out how to stop hair from graying, but I guess that's a whole nother topic, huh?
We have some patients who are gray, who are like, what's with this black hair coming
with
in
Viviscal? Yeah, the hair goes in dark on many people.
And our chiropractor and our PRP people often will see, who are gray, will see new dark hairs. And I mean, they weren't gray initially, or if they were, it was for a hot minute, because these are brand new tiny hairs that are dark.
It's an exciting time. I feel like we finally have some options for people struggling with hair loss, because it can be really, really devastating. And this has been really, really educational. Where can the listeners find you and follow you all, or come see you if they want to be a patient?
So we have an Instagram, which is Lady Derm Docs. We have a TikTok called Lady Derm Talks, which we don't look at that much or do much of. And you could see us in Towson, Maryland. Our website is www.ladydermdocs.com.
It has our address and our number and the whole bit there.
And probably the best is on Instagram. Feel free to DM us on Instagram.
Yeah, I will include those handles, website, and information all in the show notes so people can easily find it and click it. And I really appreciate you both taking your time out to help educate us about hair loss.
Thank you.
No,
this
thank
was
you
wonderful.
for asking us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We learned a lot ourselves, actually.
That's why I do this. I'm taking notes myself. I love it. All right. Well, we'll see everyone next week.